Okay, class, this is Friday, April 24th, the 10th day of our Civil Rights Unit. And this is when we're starting that next unit, or part of the unit, Unit 11, which is going to focus more on the civil rights of other groups who were inspired to move to action by the African American Civil Rights Movement. So let's just real quick go over some objectives. And we're going to do a little bit of review and then take just a little bit of notes. I also want to make sure that you check today our Friday Fun Day video where somebody is going to get a Document of the Week pass from each class. And also look to be released later, what would be today for you guys, a video about a big grade announcement for the third and then the fourth quarter. Also, honor students, you're going to have a video coming out soon about your final essay of the year. But let's look at our objectives for today. We just have one. We're going to start off this unit with the Supreme Court decisions. We're going to have a bunch of court cases. We've already had two that will be on this next test, and that is Plessy versus Ferguson and Brown versus Board. And hopefully those sound familiar. We're going to share with you five or six that are not as familiar to you, but are very important. We're going to do one today. We're going to do the rest Monday, maybe Monday, Tuesday. And then there's going to be your first assignment for the fourth quarter about those court cases Monday or Tuesday, sometime next week. I know fourth quarter technically goes to the end of next week. I'm, like I always do, closing out the last day of the week before, so I have time to sort of add it all up and make sure it all is correct. So, uh, before we do that, let's go over a few things, a little bit of review. And that's not at all the page I want to be on. So, the first thing I want to review is we did these terms at the very beginning of the unit. And I just want to make sure you're familiar with these. So AIM will be covered in this unit. Bilingual education in Unit 11, I mean. Brown versus Board, you should know already. Boycott, you should know. Civil disobedience, you should know. Freedom riders, you should know. Hippies, nope, sorry, I got ahead of myself. You technically haven't heard that yet, but I bet you have an idea. You know who the Little Rock Nine are. You know what a martyr is, or you're supposed to, and you know about Plessy versus Ferguson. So all of these things that are not checked, they'll be covered in Unit 11. Now, yesterday, our last assignment for quarter three was this review, which is really a preview guide and a review guide for the unit. Uh, I gave you a document that was attached to this. You had to answer these questions. So, what law worked to have equal pay for women? In case you didn't catch it, just to see if you were kind of right, it's the 1963 Equal Pay Act, or the Equal Pay Act. Number two, what novel was released that caused many to rally for such laws? That was a novel we'll talk about next week called The Feminine Mystique. What year does the article say everything went sour? 1968. We had a video about that when class was normal. Number four, what occurred in that year to convince many that we could not win in Vietnam? Now, that's a review from the last unit. That's TET, T-E-T. What two leaders were assassinated in that same year, that 1968? Well, there were four major leaders assassinated in the 60s in the United States, but the two that were assassinated in 1968 were in April of 68, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., and then in June of 1968, Bobby Kennedy. Identify one university where student protesters took over the campus. The American example, the first one that comes to mind is Columbia, but you could also say the Sorbonne or Free University. What social event did the article say showed a shred of hopefulness of the early 60s, even though it happened in 1969? And that would be Woodstock. How many people attended this event? Somewhere between 400 and 420,000 people. Absolutely insane. And then, of course, you had to do your opinion, and that will be graded to the same standard as a document of the week. Okay, so let's do our one new court case, and then the next thing we'll be doing, you'll switch over to the other video, which is the Friday Fun Day video, where we're just going to announce who wins Document of the Week passes, dumb laws, dumb crooks, things like that. So, Unit 12, if you want to use, and I have early on in the feed for the class the link to our textbook, it's chapter 20, section 2, and all of chapter 22. But we're talking about more and more groups fighting for civil rights and realizing that the Supreme Court might be the avenue to start to assert rights. Because again, the African American civil rights movement has so much success, that breakthrough that really kicks off the momentum of the modern civil rights movement is that win in Brown versus Board. And people sense that the court was friendly to interpreting the Constitution in such a way to actually protect minority groups rights or other groups' rights. And so Earl Warren is the Chief Justice at the time who's going to sit through a series of historic rulings. And he's also the one that was on the Warren Commission that determined uh, Lee Harvey Oswald was the only shooter in the assassination of JFK. So you're going to have a bunch of court cases. We're only going to do one today because, again, Friday Fun Day. But you will see the rest of these court cases on Monday or Tuesday. These are a little bit tougher. You're going to want to have this, written down well in your notes. I understand that when I'm giving, even if it is timed, a test uh, digitally, people are going to look at their notes. I can't help that. I understand that. The only thing I can do is make it so that you don't have time to look up everything, that hopefully you're familiar with the material and know right where to go. So you're going to need all of these court cases and have them to be referenced. We're going to talk about one today, Baker versus Carr. Uh, the way I remember this court case is I think of a car driving around voting districts. This will hopefully make more sense in a little bit. What this said was that when you are dividing up legislative districts for Congress, and I know this sounds boring, but trust me when I tell you this is really about civil rights, it has to represent roughly equal populations. Because if you just cut up a state and divide it up by geography, what you're going to have is some groups vastly underrepresented and other groups vastly overrepresented. And largely speaking, urban areas are going to be underrepresented, and minorities were more prevalent, particularly in the 60s, in urban areas, and therefore were being underrepresented in Congress. So the example that started this court case was that there were 14,000 people in one suburb of LA that got a state rep. That same legislative body had 6 million in a different part of LA and they had one rep. If one person represents 14,000, it's fairly easy for you to go visit that person. That's similar to like one city councilman for the town of Norwalk. If somebody wanted to talk to me when I was a city councilman, it wasn't hard. If I had to represent 6 million people, that's more than half the people in Ohio. It'd be really hard to get a hold of me. It'd be really hard to get a hold of that rep. For those of you who know some of your city commissioners, you can reach your city commissioners. They're very approachable people. If your city commissioners had to represent more than half of Ohio, they'd be a lot harder to get a hold of. Let me show you in a map real quick what this looks like. So before Baker versus Carr, if we wanted to, we could divide up Ohio. Now, Ohio has 16 reps in the U.S. Congress, okay? So 16 representatives. And what you could do is you could just go, okay, I know these are horrible drawings here, but you could just divide it up and go, okay, here we go. Here's how our districts will be. It's 16 areas and they're roughly the same. I know this is a really bad drawing, but if you even drew it out to be like the same number of acres, and it wouldn't be fair because some of these areas are very rural and some are very urban. Because of Baker versus Carr, this is actually what our representative areas look like. So this makes a little bit more sense. If you look here, District 11 is very small. Well, the reason it's very small is that District 11 is in Cleveland. This area here is the same number of people in this whole area here because this is a much more rural area. You go down to District 1. This area is very small because it's Cincinnati. You go to Area 3. This area is Columbus. This area here has roughly the same population as District 6, which has this rather unique shape. We'll get to that in a little bit. All of that area there, very rural area here in this part of the state, it takes all of that rural area to equal that population. And if you didn't do it by population, District 6 would have so much more representation, and that would be underrepresenting urban, anybody who lives in urban America. So that is why that court case was so big. It's not the most exciting one. Some of the other ones are a little bit more exciting than this, but that is a very, very important decision. It also helped to curb gerrymandering. Gerrymandering is something I'd rather teach in person. It's a little hard to explain, but basically it's manipulating those lines to benefit one political party over another. And you can do that. You can say, oh, we're going to have the same number of people, but you're going to try to lump all of the Republicans in just one district, draw weird lines, or lump all the Democrats in one district. That's gerrymandering. I decided that's not going to be on the test. It's not on. it wasn't going to be on the air this year anyway. So even before this happened, I wasn't putting it on there. But for those of you wondering, that's what that means. So that's our only case today, Baker versus Carr. Again, I think of that as, I remember that case by that name, Carr. Oh, I hop in my car and I drive around my voting districts. These are the weird mind games I play with myself to remember these cases. Starting on Monday, we'll go through some other cases, some of which I'm pretty sure you've heard of before. And we'll make sure you understand those. And again, your first grade of the fourth quarter will be Monday or Tuesday, which will be a review over those court cases. And of course, they'll be on the big test that we'll have in the fourth quarter over the hippies and the civil rights movement and Hispanic Americans and Native Americans. So make sure to click over to the next video, see if you get a document of the week passes, because document of the week is coming soon. And have a great weekend. And of course, as always, be safe. See you, everybody.